Thank you, Dr. Gordon. It is indeed a pleasure to be here to present this discussion of the sales tax referendum that Pinellas County voters will decide on November 4th. We have, as he said, two knowledgeable speakers who will represent each side of the issue, and then we'll take questions from the audience. First, I'd like to provide just a few basics about the issue. I'm going to assume that, let's assume that you don't know anything about it. You've just come in from Mars and you know that something's coming up. The slide you saw on the screen as you were being seated had some of this information, but let me just give a quick review. It's for 1 extra cent for every dollar spent, excluding groceries and pharmaceuticals, prescription drugs, which all of our sales tax excludes. And for major purchases, only on the first $5,000, for example, a new car or a boat purchase. And yes, that would raise the Pinellas sales tax from 7 to 8%, which would make Pinellas the highest sales tax in the state if it passes. However, 1 or 2 other counties also have referendums on their ballot, which, if they pass, would be the same, would also be 8% if ours passes. The property tax that's currently collected for transit would be repealed. The county commission has pledged that. And if you're a homeowner with a home valued at $173,000 or more, you would be, when you remove the property tax and add the sales tax, your out-of-pocket, we're told, would be $14 a year. The tax would be collected for 30 years, starting January 1, 2016, and would raise an estimated $130 million a year. What do you get for that? PSTA promises a 65% increase in bus service, and in about 10 years, a 24-mile light rail system running from downtown St. Pete to downtown Clearwater through the Gateway area, which is a very high employment center. Now, those are the basics. There are many opinions about this issue, and including whether PSTA needs the money, whether it would be a good investment, even the merits of public transit in general. So that's why we look to our panel to bring these issues out. And so without further delay, let's get to that. To do that, I'm pleased to introduce the moderator for the program, Dr. James Oliver, the provost of the Seminole campus. Dr. Oliver.
Thank you, David, and welcome everyone. So glad to see you here for this discussion this evening. It is my pleasure to be part of the program. I did moderate a similar event at the Seminole campus earlier this year, and both sides must have thought that I was scrupulously neutral, which I intend to be, and I also intend to be an equal opportunity offender. When it comes to questions, we won't do statements, we'll do questions. We want to find out from as many of you as possible all the questions you have that we can ask our panelists. Mass transit is a very complex issue, so it's really good to have forums like this where we can discuss them in a civil fashion. We're going to start by giving each of the presenters 15 minutes to present their point of view on the proposal. After that, we'll spend a few minutes discussing some of the points back and forth, and then we'll open the floor for questions from the audience, which I will moderate. To start, I'll call to the stage Mr. Ken Welch, who is a member of the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners and chairman of the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority. Commissioner Welch will speak in favor of the proposal. Ken Welch speaks at this point for 15 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver, and good evening.
Good evening.
It's good to see everyone here tonight. And first, I want to thank St. Petersburg College for hosting these forums around the county, and I'd like to welcome you to the Enoch Davis Center in beautiful County Commission District 7. I'm going to try to have eye contact with you, but this is a difficult angle. In a few weeks, Pinellas County voters will make a very important decision that will help determine the direction of our county. The Greenlight Pinellas plan will provide the kind of effective, sustainable, county-wide transit service that an urban county needs, and that every other urban county has in place or under development. And I'm not moving. Is that my fault? Okay, we're good. All right, thank you. All right. Tonight's forum was publicized with the question, is there light rail in Pinellas County's future? I would pose that a little bit differently and pose it as a question, what kind of future do we want for Pinellas County? Hence the graphic here that indicates that we are at a crossroads. We are at a decision point in Pinellas County. We have two paths that we can take. One path will build a public transit system that will increase, not decrease, our bus service. That will give access to jobs, to health care, to services, to all the other amenities around our county without having to own a vehicle. It will grow our economy and provide jobs and provide for smart, planned growth in our activity centers, in our job centers, while protecting our low-density neighborhoods where we don't want intense development. The other path will reduce the availability of bus service. I think on that point we agree. And it will commit us to rely on simply building more lanes of roadway and having limited transportation choices for our community. The supporters of Greenlight Pinellas believe that the choice is clear. So what is Greenlight Pinellas? It's a plan to dramatically improve Pinellas County's transportation system with a 65% increase in bus service with immediate improvements starting in 2014. It means faster, more frequent service. It means you don't have to wait for a bus for a whole hour. It means the buses come every 15 to 30 minutes on most of our routes. And it means expanded service county-wide, better amenities, shelters, park and ride, Wi-Fi, and other services. The part we hear about most is the rail part. A 24-mile passenger rail with 16 stations that connect the job centers, downtown St. Petersburg, Gateway, Clearwater, Pinellas Park, Clearwater, Largo, and 2 unincorporated areas, comprise of 16 stations along that rail route. The transit time from Clearwater to St. Pete should be about the same as if you were driving that route. And about 70% of Pinellas County residents will live within 5 miles of the stations by 2035. The Greenlight Pinellas plan has been developed collaboratively with over 60,000 citizens, businesses, and community leaders at some point touching the plan, through a focus group, through an e-town hall, through a telephone town hall, through a public face-to-face meeting with the Greenlight policy committees. It has been a collaborative process over the last 4 years. PSTA is seeing record ridership. We set another ridership record in July. And the metric that is used to measure ridership nationwide is boardings or rides. And we had more than 14.5 million rides last year, a 19% increase over the last 5 years. So, this is what the timetable will look like. This is the Marco Rubio moment. Being bipartisan. First phase, 2014 to 2015, limited improvements because we haven't received the new tax revenues yet. But we begin to restructure the network. We begin the Safety Harbor Jolly Trolley service. We begin Saturday service on the 100X going to Tampa. And we also begin service on the Deuces, 22nd Street, for a portion of that roadway in response to the community's request. In 2016 through 2019, the sales tax starts the revenues start to come in January, and then we phase in the introduction of bus network improvements, and we start reducing the wait time between buses. We start later night service so that the buses run till 11, 12 o'clock, and we add weekend service. We also begin the BRT and rapid bus part of the plan along Central Avenue, 49th Street, East Bay, and Gulf to Bay Boulevard. In phases 3 and 4, 2018 through 2021, we begin phase 2 of the BRT and rapid bus phase of the project on 4th Street, Almerton Road, US 19 and Seminole Boulevard. And parallel to that, 2018 through 2024, the engineering, the design, the environmental study, and the construction of the rail part. And so that is a quick overview of the timetable for implementation. The property tax goes away September 30 of 2015. That will be the last time the property tax will be implemented in Pinellas County. September 30, 2015. The end of that fiscal year. So let's talk about why we think Greenlight Pinellas is the right thing for our community. We think it's a fair tax. When the property tax is eliminated, the county's transit system will instead be funded by a 1 cent increase in the sales tax. We think that is a fair approach that reduces the burden of property taxes on property owners in Pinellas County. And not every community in Pinellas even contributes through the property tax right now. So we think this is a fair approach to funding some very basic infrastructure, just as the penny for Pinellas funds infrastructure through the sales tax. Just some quick bullets on the sales tax. As Dave said, we are now, there's talk about us being the highest sales tax in the county. If this passes, that's right, we'll be at 8%. Right now, we're the second highest sales tax in the state, there are 9 counties that have a 7.5% sales tax rate. We have a 7% sales tax rate. If this passes, we'll be at 8%, a 0.5% above those other 9 counties. Again, the property tax will be eliminated. Polk County has a measure on their ballot November 4th. If that passes, they will have an 8% sales tax. Hillsborough County is moving towards a 2016 referendum. If that passes, they will have an 8% sales tax as well. I think it's important you look at the overall tax burden, though. Pinellas County has always been competitive in the overall tax burden. It's not just about sales tax. When you look at our property taxes, we are lower than every other large urban county in the state of Florida, and these are the median property taxes by county from taxrates.org. The only county that has a lower median property tax rate is Duval County and Polk County. Every other county, Broward, Hillsborough, Lee County, Manatee, Miami-Dade, Orange, so forth, has a higher median property tax rate. That's important to keep in mind. Even when you fill up your car, and this is another, this is from Forbes, it shows you the same thing. It ranks all of the counties in terms of the median property tax paid, and you see here, this is from 2009, about the same number, $1,665 for Pinellas County. We're 309th in the nation in terms of property tax impact from high to low, and again, we're below all the other large urban counties, except for Polk County in the state of Florida. Even when you fill up your car, local gas tax, if you fill it up in Manatee or Orange County, you're paying 5 cents more on every gallon. In Pinellas County, we have not raised the gas tax. We're at 7 cents, again, lower than just about every other large urban county. So it's important to keep the total tax impact in perspective. Again, tourists will pay about 1/3 of the taxes each year, and our tourism is well over 5 million, approaching 6 million tourists every year. We think it's fair that they would contribute to keeping or building our transit infrastructure, just as they contribute to the penny for Pinellas for our other infrastructure. This is a point I want to spend a little time on, and I know I'm winding up on time, but it's important to know what happens if we take one path or the other. Greenlight Pinellas will improve our bus service, and it does that first. There's a lot of talk about the rail segment, but the bus improvements happen first, and they are vital. In fact, I think they're the most important part of this service. This is a community bus plan, a plan conducted for PSTA by a consulting group, and this is the plan that we can have if Greenlight passes. Now, it's important to note that we have enhanced service with Greenlight, and I want you to focus on the light blue lines that say supporting local, because an important difference between Greenlight and the no tax plan is that there's a significant impact on these light blue lines on the supporting local network. Here's 22nd Avenue South, 62nd Avenue South, MLK. Under the new revenue scenario that the opposition, or no new tax, I won't call them the opposition, says is a solution, there's a significant reduction in those routes. We need to understand it's a reduction in bus service. And I know I've got to hurry up, thank you. That's what that looks like if we implement the no new revenue scenario, option 1. Those blue areas that were highlighted on the previous slide, MLK is gone, 62nd Avenue is gone, 22nd Avenue South is gone. other supporting network routes around the county are eliminated. 63% of the supporting local network is eliminated under that option. The other option is to keep the network, but increase the wait times on every of those routes to 60 minutes. So either you're going to eliminate 63% of the supporting local network, or you're going to delete 3 of them, and on every other route, folks are going to have to wait 60 minutes on every route. That's a real substantial difference that we need to understand between Greenlight and what would happen here. And we've been through cuts on PSTA, and I'll hold some of this for later, but it's very difficult when you're cutting routes that folks depend on to get to work, and some 67% of our riders ride the bus to get to work, to leave those folks without any viable options. So again, Greenlight will provide improvements for all sections of the county. Tourists will contribute to that. What we're seeing in Orlando already is transit-oriented development. We're already seeing development happening along that route, and that's what we believe will happen in Pinellas County as well. And as you probably know, Governor Scott has recommended $200 million for a rail station at the Orlando airport to connect with Sunrail. And so I think we ought to get our fair share here in Pinellas County as well. Greenlight will be monitored by a Citizens Oversight Committee. It also will have a Transit Riders Advisory Committee. We have a strong interlocal agreement with the county that has specific milestones in it, and so there will be abundant oversight for the Greenlight plan. This is what the business community told us. I would just highlight this last circle. The most immediate need is a greatly improved bus system. We cannot do that without adding additional revenue, and the no new revenue scenario, as I showed you, cuts service. It doesn't increase service. We think it's the right thing to do county-wide, north, south, and the beaches, and those are the reasons that I highlighted. For all those reasons, we think Greenlight Pinellas is the right thing to do. I really appreciate y'all having us for this conversation. I look forward to the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Welch. Now I'd like to call on Mr. Dan Liedtke, who is a member of the Gulfport City Council. He will speak in opposition to the proposal for 15 minutes. Mr. Liedtke.
Listen, I'm here because I care about our public transportation system. It's too important to too many people, and we need to be having conversations like this if we're ever going to improve. I don't want to be having conversations every 3 years about cutting service 30% or raising taxes. When a public organization like PSTA comes forward with a request to raise its tax revenue by over 300%, we need to understand why, and we need to understand the cost, and we also need to understand a little history before we can make an informed decision. I want to begin tonight talking briefly about some history of public transportation in Pinellas County. I'm going to be talking fast because I got 50 slides to get through. All right, here we go. Okay. Because those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat. According to what is written on the walls of the St. Petersburg History Museum, the first streetcar in Pinellas County started operations in 1905 with a line from downtown St. Pete to Gulfport, my town. The St. Petersburg and Gulf Railway Company was owned by a guy named F.A. Davis. Davis owned land in Gulfport and hoped that the streetcars to Gulfport would help promote his real estate business. The streetcar system quickly expanded to include more than 23 miles of tracks. Much of the expansion provided access to areas being developed by real estate speculators. Wow, does that sound familiar? Despite the popularity of the streetcars, the St. Petersburg and Gulf Railway Company declared bankruptcy in 1919, even though St. Petersburg's population grew by 804% from 1900 to 1920. So rather than shut down the lines, the city's residents voted to approve a bond that enabled the city to take over the lines. However, by 1930, streetcar use was rapidly declining due to technology advances. Advancements in rubber and automobile manufacturing made it possible for more people to own cars. The trend slowed during World War II due to rationing of gas and rubber, but it was just a matter of time before the last streetcar was rolled into the graveyard. After the war, the streetcar system struggled to stay afloat, and in October of 1947, St. Petersburg voted to phase out streetcars in favor of buses. By 1950s, buses were everywhere, and streetcars were completely gone from the entire Tampa Bay area. Now, these conversions in public transportation occurred all over the country in similar fashions at similar times. Even my hometown of Sioux Falls, South Dakota had streetcars at one time, only to be phased out with buses beginning in the 1930s. People learned buses were cheaper and more flexible than streetcars, and that is still true today. Almost all of the early streetcar systems throughout the entire United States disappeared by the early 1950s. Now, never in our country's history was public transportation more important than during World War II. With rationing, it became impractical for many to own cars, and many people had no option but to use public transit. It played a critical role in our national security, and it still does today. Public transportation was so important during the war that if you were a good bus mechanic, your services may have been deemed too essential to be drafted. When my grandfather was drafted, the guy pictured in the overalls here, he was in his prime. He was the strongest guy in the shop, and he could hit a dime at 200 yards with a .22. He would have been the perfect soldier, but his job as a bus mechanic kept him from the battlefield when his boss, pictured on the right, found a way to defer his draft. Grandpa Jones ended up serving his city as a respected bus mechanic for over 40 years, and wow, did his skills come in handy with my first couple cars. Now, back in these days, there wasn't much political influence on public transportation other than a little propaganda from the government reminding you to car share so the military would have what they needed to win the war. These are a couple of government-funded propaganda posters produced during the war that were very effective. Nobody wanted to ride with Hitler, and everybody wanted to win the war. By the way, the number of people in that cartoon car is 3 times the average number of people you'll find on a PSTA bus. Now, if we fast forward to today, you'll see that government propaganda is alive and well. The enemy has changed, but the message seems to stay the same. We're still trying to get people out of their car. Public transportation has become increasingly politicized lately, and it is coming at the expense of those who rely on it. For some people, public transportation systems are a matter of life and death, and it should not be politicized in the interest of changing social behaviors. So let me start with a soft definition of propaganda, and then let me address why our government should not be involved in biased education campaigns like Greenlight Pinellas. First of all, it's a form of communication aimed towards influencing the attitude of a population. It's information that is biased. Facts are selectively presented, possibly lying by omission. Decisions are influenced by what someone else, in this case PSTA, wants you to believe. It creates an uninformed electorate that obstructs democracy, and voter decisions are made that may contradict your best interest or opinion. If you believe in Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address, what we should have is government of the people, by the people, for the people. But with taxpayer-funded propaganda or yes campaigns, we're ending up with government of the elites, by the bureaucrats, for what they claim is best for the people, or basically it's government over the people. The simple fact is some leaders in Pinellas County don't trust their constituents to make their own decisions. They are telling you what you need to buy, when you need to buy it, and could care less if you make a decision that goes against your principles or may not be in your best interest. Well, why do so many people believe the PSTA Greenlight campaign is pure propaganda? Well, because PSTA's CEO Brad Miller told me so when I asked him at a Gulfport City Council meeting, does any of the outreach material discuss the cons of the Greenlight Pinellas plan? His answer was straight up no, and he didn't even tell me it was a good question before he gave the answer. And then days later, Brad goes on WTSP and tells, it's not really necessary to talk about negative facts. Earlier this month, he says they've been transparent from the beginning. Well, I think they've only been transparent about not having to talk about negative facts. When County Commissioner Charlie Justice and Janet Long were state legislators, they tried to put a law in the books preventing government agencies from advocating on issues. In 2008, this was the concern then Senator Charlie Justice wanted to address. He didn't want tax dollars going to educate him on how to vote on an issue. Unfortunately, Charlie's concerns from 2008 are still valid today. What we have today is not created an informed electorate. It hurts democracy, and it's one of the many reasons people don't trust their government. Non-factual information and subjective comments are allowed in certain media, and government agencies in Florida can spend as much as they want dancing the advocacy on an issue that comes before voters, as long as they avoid those certain magic words. PSTA can make false claims like tourists pay 1/3% of the sales tax, when in 2012 it was actually 28.15%. Take away the non-taxables, it's probably closer to 1/4 than it is 1/3. PSTA can spend millions educating you on the pros and nothing but the pros. PSTA does not have to spend a dime educating you on any drawbacks or negatives that may directly impact you or your neighborhoods. PSTA can wrap buses in ads to brand their issue while denying you the option to purchase a competitive brand using the same means. They can make unrealistic claims like 200,000 more residents are moving into the county. The truth is, we recently lost the Florida House representative from population decline in Pinellas. They can tell you congestion will be reduced when there's mountains of evidence to the contrary. So the attempt by Charlie Justice and Janet Long to prevent taxpayer-funded advocacy has failed, and I think it's time we start judging people on the results and not their intentions. Now let's look at some of the details in the Greenlight Pinellas plan as far as how it's going to reduce congestion. First, let's put aside all the traffic studies just for a moment, because every study that you find that says it reduces congestion, somebody else can find one that says it increases it or it just grows slower. So let's just look at what the plan calls for, use our own judgment on what we think the results will be. First of all, we're going to get 41 new railroad crossings, stopping traffic about 4,000 times a day. We're taking away traffic lanes for bus-only lanes. This is a slide that at one time was on the Greenlight Pinellas website, but is not any longer. We're going to take away center turn lanes. This is East Bay Drive, at least 3.7 miles of it. We're going to shoot right up the middle of it with a train. Where those red cars are in the middle, that's where the turn lanes used to be. This is the engineering conceptual off the website. Oh, we're going to take away parking too. There's no parking near the railroad tracks ever, right? And now that we've got fewer parking spaces, we can charge more for the spots we have left. And maybe we're going to add 65% more buses around town, only if there's no revenue shortfalls or there's no cost overruns on the train. And we're going to have a population boom of around 200,000 people. Part of the Greenlight Pinellas plan is to rezone all land around the proposed rail stops to allow for maximum density. They believe they can artificially create a population boom in the county by building thousands of apartments along the rail line or transit-oriented development. But one of the pitfalls of TODs is not many people who move into a TOD are giving up their car. So instead of transit-oriented development, we end up with transit-adjacent development and a whole lot more cars on the road. These 7 points I just covered is congestion by design and not congestion relief. PolitiFact took a look at the congestion claims, and they rated the claim light rail does not reduce congestion as half true, instead of totally true, because of one argument from this guy, Vukan Vucic. Vukan Vucic, professor of transportation and engineering at the University of Pennsylvania, has for several decades been a staunch advocate for light rail transit. Perhaps it's the leading advocate. Some call Vukan the god of light rail. Born and raised in communist Yugoslavia, he moved to the U.S. in '61 to attend Berkeley. Well, Vukan believes the free market cannot decide what is best for us, and the government should tell us how we should travel. He's a socialist raised in a communist country who desires nothing more than to see the U.S. become like Europe. The claim from Vukan in the PolitiFact article states, the only way to ensure net loss of vehicles is to completely reorganize entire cities with pedestrian zones and policies that make car ownership prohibitive. Dr. Vukan Vucic is the type of guy that thinks it's okay to restrict the days you can drive your car based on your license plate numbers. You've got a 1 or a 2, you can't drive on Mondays or you get a fine. And that's not part of the Greenlight Pinellas plan, not yet. But you should understand the politics of the person PolitiFact used as their basis for only a half-true ruling on the increased congestion claim. It should have been a rule flat-out true by PolitiFact. Now, can you think of any policies that might make ownership of cars prohibitive with the Greenlight Pinellas plan? How about the 7 points I just covered? The light rail plan will no doubt increase congestion. By how much is the only unknown. I want to talk about the DHS grant for a minute. In 2011, two counties in Florida, Broward and Pinellas, were awarded money from the Department of Homeland Security. And I want to talk about this because it talks to the sense of accountability and trust at PSTA, and it makes one wonder how they will manage an extra $100 million a year. DHS is a serious entity that doesn't mess around, and it plays a vital role in our security here at home. Now, when these grants were awarded, the threshold for automatic audits was $500,000, and the intent of the money was to have an anti-terrorism campaign. If you see something suspicious, what do you do about it? And how do you recognize something suspicious? Well, what did Broward County do with that money? They hired a security consultant and completed the following. They updated transit security plans, they updated continuity of operations plans, they updated emergency response plans, they updated and distributed emergency response guides, they completed threat and vulnerability assessments, and they included the Transit Watch program in their updated plans. What did PSTA do with their DHS funds? They hired an advertising agency to brand Greenlight Pinellas. This is Eva. She's a college student with an internship downtown. Her time is valuable and she knows PSTA cares. Philip, he lives at the beach, he works downtown, he's going green. Margaret and Victor, they're active seniors who enjoy visiting the sites in Pinellas, having a great time at Clearwater Aquarium here. They even got their own billboard. All the ads ended with the little DHS disclaimer and the Greenlight Pinellas logo. Now, if you've ever had marketing, you know that there are 5 stages of marketing. The first stage of marketing is branding. Many people believe these ads were simply an effort to define PSTA's identity and make people feel comfortable, warm and fuzzy towards the safe and secure PSTA. This was an attempt to get people to join the campaign by creating ads that people can identify with and hopefully will form a close bond with. Well, prompted to investigate by justifiably concerned citizens, DHS determined the ads did not meet the requirements for an anti-terrorism campaign, and on July 30th, we gave back $354,000 to DHS. Possibly the first time in history anybody's ever given grant money back to the Department of Homeland Security. So what did PSTA do after returning $354,000 to DHS? They went on the blame game. First they went after the opponents of Greenlight. You know, it's a politics of distraction and misdirection. direction. They're continuously making unfounded accusations. The ads are run before the referendum's on the ballot, so it can't be considered advocacy. At this time, Brad Miller was still saying they were in compliance. He's sorry it occurred. Any future media inquiries on this subject must be forwarded to PSDA's public relations firm, K Communications. After blaming opponents of Greenlight, PSDA did something even worse. Okay. They went on to blame DHS. Now, bad-mouthing federal agencies in public that provide money to our county is not a good idea, especially when it might be your fault. Is DHS happy they got their money back? End of story, let's move on? I don't think so. Especially after being criticized by the CEO of PSDA and some PSDA board members. On August 14th, DHS sent a letter to PSDA letting them know that even though they returned a stockpile of money, they are still liable for criminal and civil penalties. And DHS also told PSDA, get the DHS name off any and all PSDA ads immediately. So now PSDA is potentially under investigation for possibly violating Title 18 of the U.S. Code, specifically 286, conspiracy to defraud the government, 287, false, fictitious, and fraudulent claims, and 1002, possession of false papers to defraud the United States. Conspiracy to defraud the government comes with a maximum 10 years in federal prison. So with all that is known, there are no new questions that need to be answered. When is biting the hand that feeds you a good idea? If the DHS Secretary Jay Johnson and Anthony Fox from the Transportation Administration got together to discuss a PSTA grant, do you think this would come up? What would they talk about? And this is probably the most important question. Does PSTA and the Board of Directors believe Greenlight and Pinellas' agenda trumps our community's security? Can and will it happen again? Last week, U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel announced the Middle East ISIS terrorist threat is unlike anything we've ever seen before. He also said ISIS is a greater threat than Al-Qaeda was before 9/11. He said this last week. Remember, ISIS is a terrorist gang that was too extreme for Al-Qaeda. The risks from terrorism are very real and possibly at its greatest in a long time. And PSTA gives us Eve, Philip, Margaret, and Victor. Yesterday, PSTA finally admitted they made mistakes and they were going to learn from them. What an expensive lesson that is. Unfortunately, it took a few stories from WTSP Channel 10, constant citizen pressure, and a little note from the DHS about possible jail time to get their attention. Stay tuned, this fiasco is not over yet. Now, you hear a lot about this being fairly funded. I completely disagree. Regressive taxes like sales tax negatively impact the county's poorest residents, disabled veterans, and our seniors on fixed incomes the most. Those who can least afford to pay higher sales tax will pay the greatest percentage of their income in taxes. Tourist and seasonal residents are only paying about a quarter, not the 1/3. And keep in mind, we are only talking about the PSTA portion of our property taxes. Under Greenlight Pinellas, you will still pay all other property taxes to the county school district in your city. A home right now across the street from here, Miss Mitchell's home, she paid $270 in property taxes in 2012. Under Greenlight Pinellas, Miss Mitchell will pay $262 while adding 14% tax to all her taxable purchases. My numbers kind of got skewed off here, but who pays higher taxes under the PSTA with Greenlight? Well, based on reports from the Pinellas County Property Appraiser, I'm done. I didn't even see my 2-minute warning.
I kept waiting for my hand.
Okay, I didn't get it. Can I get 2 minutes? Just 2 minutes?
That was 16 minutes.
Oh, really?
I saw the 2-minute warning.
Okay.
We tried to keep it 15 minutes, we heard everybody.
Okay.
Gotta wrap it up.
All right. Can I just go to the conclusion page? Let me just go to the conclusion. Yeah. In conclusion, these are the reasons I'm voting on Greenlight. It will increase congestion and emissions. It's not what I would call fairly funded when you consider the principles of public transportation. And landlords who will save money by not paying property taxes anymore under Greenlight will not be reducing your rent accordingly. They'll pocket it. The right leadership is not in place, as we can see from recent major mistakes. There are too many career politicians on the PST board. I think we need a couple more laymen and a different system for forming the board. We need more people who know how to run an actual business, who understand the value of a dollar. We're failing to maintain billions of dollars in existing infrastructure. Some of that also comes with a cost to the environment. Technology killed the streetcars of the 40s, and technology will kill the streetcars of today. We're about 20 years late to the light rail game. With $17.5 trillion in national debt, the tolerance for federal funding of light rail is rapidly fading. Finally, we are totally reliving history. Let's not doom ourselves to repeating it. Let's be 21st century innovators and not 19th century pioneers. Thank you.
Very good. Very interesting presentations. When we started, we talked about having fun at this event. Let's try to have fun, okay? We're going to ask the two presenters to come up. I'm going to start with a couple of questions, and then I just want to open it. I believe David has I believe you two gentlemen are coming up here, is that correct?
Yes.
They're coming up here, and then I've got a couple of questions I'm going to ask them both, and then we're going to open it up and let you ask any question you want. David Clement has the mic, and he'll pass it around. Please raise your hand because we are filming this, and we want to make sure that the questions that get asked get heard, so that when this is replayed and others get a chance to look at it, they can hear the questions as well as the answers. Several of the items I think both of you spoke about, and I think it might be good to have an opportunity to talk about issues that both of you said favored your position. We'll start the first question. These are both questions that you both spoke about. We'll start the first question with asking Commissioner Welch, and then we'll ask Councilman Liedtke to respond, and then the second question we'll reverse it. I want to try to be as fair as I can. Just kind of keep your responses to a couple of minutes, please. Both of you talked about the fact that this was going to be an issue related to congestion. It was going to be congestion. And Commissioner Welch, you talked about the fact this would mean more highways, more asphalt, more congestion. Councilman Liedtke talked about the fact that that was not the case, that there were studies that showed that it would actually add to congestion. Please, both of you, enumerate what you've learned in your studies and why you take that position about congestion.
Okay, well, there was so much in that I thought we'd have a chance to rebut, but in terms of congestion, what we are looking at is building a congestion-proof element to the rail segment from Clearwater to St. Petersburg that is working in other communities. We are the last to the race. Every other community has these systems in place, and they're not seeing the congestion that Councilmember Liedtke referred to. In fact, when you look at the travel times that are estimated in the alternatives analysis, they are comparable to if you were to drive the route as well. But I did not hear in all of those accusations, and there were some that were just way off the page, from socialism to ISIS. I mean, this is not about the issue. I didn't hear any solutions. All I hear are, attacks on PSTA, socialism, those kinds of things. We cannot just continue to build road lanes and add more cars. That is a guarantee of more congestion. And so if you have a bus service that people actually choose to use, for every person like myself who will get on that bus or get on that rail, that's a person that's not driving a car. So those combination effects will reduce congestion, and I think the alternatives analysis does a good job of looking at projected drive times, projected transit times if this is
And Councilman, and then we're going to talk about congestion. I have a question about the plan. That's my actual second question. So
He's right. I didn't talk about any solutions because I ran out of time.
Right. But we're going to give you a chance on the next question. So let's talk about your studies in congestion and your thesis that this will actually cause increased congestion.
The only way it's going to decrease congestion is if people get out of their cars. And that's not what is happening across the country. If you see these transit-oriented developments pop up, the majority of people that move into those will still keep a car. I think it's a lower percentage than residential neighborhoods, but I think it's over 85, 87% of the people that are moving into Todd's are keeping their cars. So the only way with light rail to reduce congestion, is to, first of all, don't have 4,000 stops a day, but you got to get people out of the car, and that isn't happening across the country.
Let me move to the question of the plan, because Commissioner Welch talked about the fact that Greenlight was a plan that was developed with a lot of people, talked about a lot of collaboration, a lot of involvement. Your comments essentially said this was a plan concocted, that's a loaded word I know, but developed by government, for government. And so talk about the alternative, because I heard Commissioner Welch talk about the no tax plan. I'm not sure I know what that is. If you would talk about your plan or your alternative, and then Commissioner Welch, if you'd speak to that as well.
My alternative to what? To building light rail?
To the current system of transit in Pinellas County.
I'm I'm not sure I understand. What's the alternative to the current transit
What
system? Or?
As a spokesperson for the no tax for tracks.
I'm not a spokesperson for no tax.
Okay, as the individual speaking against the Greenlight Pinellas initiative, is there an alternative to the Greenlight Pinellas initiative to deal with transit issues in Pinellas County, or do we have no transit issues in Pinellas County?
Yeah, we do. The first thing I'd like to see is PSTA be a little more frugal. You know, we like to talk about Salt Lake's success at Light Rail. You know, they built it 20 years ago. Well, one of the things they did when they needed a new maintenance facility was they refurbished an old warehouse. I think PSTA built a $40 million facility. The other things we need to do to help reduce, we're talking about reducing congestion, right? Okay, we need to manage traffic better. You know, we need to have HOV lanes or lanes that can go in both directions, right? Some of the other things that are in the future, self-driving cars, you know, that's a long ways off, but you know, they're still testing them. They're testing them in our neighborhoods now. They were in Washington, D.C. testing them last week. If you end up with a bunch of self-driving cars that talk to each other, you know, they drive closer together, the travel times are shorter. Other than that, I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Welch, you mentioned the no tax plan as not being a viable alternative to the Greenlight plan.
Well, I'll take the council member at his word, but these arguments are the same exact arguments that we've heard for no tax for quite a long time. When I refer to the no tax plan, what several members, Ms. Hazelden in particular, have said PSTA should do, and I think this was said at Seminole, is implement the no new revenue plan. And the no new revenue plan is an alternative in the Pinellas County Community Bus Plan. And it basically had two alternatives. If we get new revenue through Greenlight, you can implement this plan. If you don't get new revenue, and that's called the no new revenue plan, it's called the no plan, then you will have to reduce service. And so it's important that we understand when they say implement the no new revenue plan as the alternative, it means you are cutting 63% of those blue routes, or you are cutting 3 of those routes, and on every remaining route, you're upping the wait time to 60 minutes. And since we agree that the community bus plan scenarios are accurate, they've been factually put together, I think folks need to understand that that is the alternative that they are putting forward. I've heard no other real alternative. HOV lanes, we're working with FDOT. FDOT has been a partner in working on the alternatives analysis. We're about choice. We're not trying to move anyone out of their cars. I'm a car nut. My next car is a Mustang convertible, and my wife already knows that once my kid gets out of college. But, you know, it's about choice. We're not saying you have to get out of your car, but for someone who wants the choice of not having to own a car or not having to buy that second or third car, that's what Greenlight Pinellas does. On the self-driving cars, those are 30, 40 years out if you read the literature. Again, folks, you know, this always happens. I don't
Now, if we can, this is civil dialogue. You may disagree, but let's let everyone have their say.
Read the
on all
literature.
sides.
Read the literature and Google it. It's not 1 or 2 cars running a test route on an expressway that you've shut down. To have full automated vehicles is several decades out because you have got all the infrastructure in place on your roadways and the cars. And so to say that I'm going to be able to order up a car in 10 years and that's going to solve the congestion problem just is not factually correct. Even the biggest supporters of automated vehicles don't see that as a solution for years to come.
One more point. The iPhones came out 6 years ago. I can guarantee you there will be driverless functionality on cars by 2020. Technology is exponentially increasing right now.
Well, that's something we'll be able to check out in 2020. I plan to be here to host another debate. Now it's time for your questions. Here's the deal. We're gonna ask folks to raise their hands, and I know there's a lot of passion on this on both sides. Please just ask a question. You can ask a question to either one of the gentlemen, or you can ask the question to both of them. If you ask it to one, please, gentlemen, try to keep this is a relatively small group, but try to keep your questions to 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll give the other gentleman an opportunity to have a response, to try to be totally fair. So whoever you ask, we'll have 3 minutes response, and then a counter response. And David Clement has the mic. Good luck, David, picking out folks time after time. Here we go. And if you'd please stand and speak loudly, so we're trying to get this on film.
My name is Mary Flynn. I teach GED here in Pinellas County. Both of you gentlemen present a problem with the rail and also with self-driving cars or whatever you have.
values are up 8%, I think, in the county. So next year, PSTA is going to have $2 million more than they will this year. Plus, there's some other sources of funding we could possibly hit. You know, if we didn't have to give $354,000 back to DHS, we could have used that. So I'd like to see us improve and expand our bus system where we can. Right now, the millage rate is set at like 0.7350. I'm okay if you go to 7.5 if it gives you enough to bring in another bus or two to serve those people you're talking about.
We are at 0.7305 and the cap is 0.75, so even if we go to the cap, it's not going to give us enough revenue. I think your question was about access though, and not the DHS grant, which I really would like to speak to at some point. But we have an approach that looks at all options to get folks to the bus or to the rail, whether it's bike, and a tremendous amount of folks bike to the buses. Right now you see the bikes on the front of the buses, better pedestrian access, better shelters, park and ride. We just had an agreement with the city of St. Pete for a new park and ride on 8th and 1st. Flex routes is something that we've implemented in North County where the smaller vehicles will actually go off of the route a certain amount of distance to pick up folks so they don't have to walk as far. And the other thing in terms of technology is ride sharing, where on your phone you can call up a car and they can take you that short distance. So we're looking at all options to help folks get past that last mile.
May I ask the speakers to put the mics a little closer to their face?
Willie Foster. Could the both of you address this in your plan? How do you see, because we're growing and being a very congested area, how do you see your plan, either one, impact on pollution in this area?
The question is to both of the gentlemen.
Both of them, yes.
Well, I'll answer for mine. I still haven't heard what their plan is, other than no new revenue scenario. But in our plan, the more cars that you get off the road, the lower emissions. PSTA has a policy of purchasing hybrid buses, which have lower emissions as well. Rail is a cleaner technology than just putting more cars on the road. So that is our contribution to helping the environment with a product that's more environmentally friendly.
Well, under the Greenlight plan, there will be increased congestion and there will be increased emissions, and that's just based on what happens everywhere. I'd like to see us get more electric buses. They're working on wireless charging technology where you just drive over, the bus just drives over a little strip of, charged ground, and it charges the bus while it's moving. You only need to actually have 20% of the bus network to keep the buses charging. We could actually make gas stations a thing of the past. Not only can buses drive over those charging areas, but so could cars. So let's try to work on hybrid buses or fully electric buses to help reduce the emissions.
Yes, I'm Betsy from St. Petersburg, and my question is this. In these plans and presentations, what seems to be missing is the new gateway connector, toll road. And I'm circling back to the congestion. I'd like to ask Commissioner Welch, what do you feel the impact is going to be on traffic congestion now that we have a plan to implement very quickly this gateway connector, toll road, from the Skyway all the way to Clearwater without a traffic light?
I think it was great, and it's always been in the plan. For some reason this year, it was moved up from 2040 to now, but we still think that is a good improvement for folks that want to make that choice to drive, but it doesn't provide coverage for the entire county. And it still is a toll facility, which was not originally intended to be a toll facility. So we welcome it. Again, that's a several $100 million facility that doesn't pay for itself, yet I don't see the opposition to that. It's good for our county. We welcome it, but the Greenlight Pinellas plan is about adding options. It's not about saying, no, you can't do this or do that.
The gateway connector is paid for, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
No, it is not. That's why it's tolled. It's not paid for.
So those who use it will pay for it, those who don't
But it
use
is not paid for. Let's have some facts.
We're not the Tampa Bay Times. I'm not sure if anybody from the Tampa Bay Times is here, but David from the Institute will be our own fact checker. And when we have issues like this, where obviously there's a difference of opinion, we'll try to find out what they are and post them on our website. Yes, young man.
How you doing? I'm Gerard Benson from St. Pete College. Student at St. Pete College. The one with this new plan, both of you guys,
get to class, but by the time class is out, the routes aren't running anymore. I don't have weekend service. I can't work a second shift. So that's one of the main parts of the plan. Not only will we have shorter wait times between buses, but we will actually add some routes, and we will have later service up to midnight on several routes and weekend service as well. So that's a main part of the plan.
He's right, that is the main part of the plan, and that will only happen if there is no cost overruns on the train. It will only happen if we get all the money that we're told we're going to get from the federal government and the state. As soon as we don't have the money, or we have a revenue shock, or the sales tax isn't coming in like we thought, you can't cut the train. There's nothing to cut on a rail line. You're going to have to cut buses. So the initial plan is just as Ken described it, but in the long term, we really don't know if we can guarantee that.
Well, that is conjecture, and if you look at our financial analysis by Ernst & Young, there have been 3 financial analyses: the alternatives analysis, then Ernst & Young came in independently and did a financial analysis and said, yes, the plan is viable even with stress cases, like the sales tax not going up 3% a year, or another recession, or another terrorist event. They looked at each stress case and said, even with those, the plan is viable. We are putting 50% in at a local level, which is more than most projects require. We have a large contingency, so you can't just, make up things and say, well, if this happens, it's not going to work. I suggest you read the plan and read the financial analysis, and then look at the PRAG third look at the finances that agreed with the second look at the finances.
Councilman, one last word on this
Yeah,
question.
thank you. Well, first of all, I work with a lot of Ernst & Young folks, and some of them are really sharp, some of them are still learning. And the stress cases in that feasibility test, they only looked at them independently. If 2 or more of those stress cases occur at the same time, it's a negative cash flow for PSTA.
All right, let's move on to our next question. David?
David McCaleb at St. Pete. I have a question about how bus service is not going to be cut in Midtown. So just a couple of quick facts. You have a $3 million surplus this year after predicting millions of dollars in shortfall. I'm not sure nobody revenues. You've spent $1 million almost promoting Greenlight Pinellas with tax dollars. You got raises to the PSTA bus drivers during a recession when poor people with no jobs riding buses got no raise. And yet we couldn't find a way to increase bus service here. And the train doesn't come
May I have a question, sir? We need a
The
question.
train doesn't come into Midtown. The train stops at the pricey condos in downtown Clearwater. It doesn't go to any black neighborhood. So what I want to know is, it goes to downtown Clearwater and downtown St. Pete. So what I want to know is, how come the people in Midtown, in the black neighborhoods of Pinellas County, need to wait for a bus while everyone else gets a train? And why can't you increase bus service now with the millions of extra dollars you have, instead of having a service where 7 people ride it in the country club communities of Eastlake and North Pinellas? Why can't you increase bus service now, and why don't we get trains in Midtown?
Well, there's several questions there, and I'm going to try to be succinct. Like every local government, when property tax values came in higher this year than we expected, that's a good thing. PSTA has saved money through energy conservation. We've saved money through vacant positions. So when you put all those things together, including some lawsuits that we've won, that adds up to why we have additional money, just like the county has additional money that helped us deal with the EMS problem. That's a good thing. It's a combination of financial management and the property values being higher than expected. In terms of our employees getting salaries, only the step increases that are by contract have our employees received over the last several years. Just like every local government, we have been flat. And it's interesting that you want to speak to issues in the black community, in the lower income community. First thing I said was the bus service.
If we can, let's have a conversation, please.
Let me finish.
We need to have, ma'am, I know you have your hand up, and we'll get to you with a question, please.
Let me finish the answer, David. The first thing I said is that we increase bus service countywide. Under your plan, the no new revenue, we cut supporting local service. Look at the blue lines on 22nd Avenue South, on MLK, on 62nd Avenue South. Those are cut under your plan. Now, furthermore,
Guys,
under
We will adjourn this meeting if we have outright, we will ask people who from the audience who speak out to please leave.
Well,
Because this is about having a civil dialogue, not a shouting back and forth. That's enough. Please. Let's please have a civil dialogue. It's important that we have a discussion. Let the commissioner respond. I think he's heard your question.
This is what I've dealt with for years, and we want to talk about the issues. Now, the final thing is on affordable housing, on social action, on meals to wheels, on homeless issues. I've led on all of those issues in this community, and you all, and you in particular, have opposed those issues. You opposed Affordable Housing Trust Fund for the county. You opposed the penny for Pinellas and said it was illegal use of penny for Pinellas funds under your cut no taxes group. So you've opposed all these things, but now when it's expedient for you politically, you want to wrap the poor and minorities around you. Folks are smarter than that. They know who's led on these issues, and so we are trying to maintain service for everyone in this county, including Midtown. And for you to try to win your argument on the back of folks that you've never represented is irreprehensible.
Councilman, you have a response?
I don't know.
Councilman, it's time for the councilman's response.
I'd like to ask that nobody outburst anymore. We have a lot of things we want to talk about here, and we're just trying to help the people that ride the bus and possibly build the train. So please, if y'all could just hold it down, please. One of the things I didn't get to touch on was, how much more of an impact is the southern part of the county going to pay versus the northern part of the county? I got to Clearwater. 73% of Clearwater is going to have tax cuts. And if you're concerned about those lower income neighborhoods, then the sales tax is not a fair way to fund it. Because in the zip code we're in right now, 93% of the residential property owners in this zip code will pay higher taxes. Hitting the poor middle class neighborhoods with 3 times the impact of the beach communities does not seem like a fair way to fund transit. So I'd like to find a fair way to fund it and make sure we can serve those lower income communities with bus service.
Well, again, I think we need to fact check tonight because the council member is coming up with this information that no one's vetted, no one's seen. The alternative analysis has been vetted several times, so I just think we need to keep that in perspective. 2 beach communities now, St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island, don't pay any property tax, but both of their city commissions have endorsed this plan because they think it's good for the entire community. So to say that, and so they're going to have a large increase in what they pay, but they see the benefit, particularly because they're tourism-related communities. If I can just, 30 seconds.
130 seconds.
One of the things that we are trying to deal with in this county is the impact of poverty. We're working on a CRA right now in St. Pete in the middle of where we sit right now. And whether it's homelessness or recidivism, folks not being able to get to jobs that might be outside of their neighborhood, might be in Clearwater, Safety Harbor, what we keep hearing is we need better transportation options. And the folks that I talk to in this neighborhood that I've represented now for 4 terms tell me that it is worth it to have a bus system that they can rely on.
Councilman, any last word on this topic? Thank you very much. I think we're learning facts. I told both gentlemen, I learned things at the last forum, I'm learning things at this forum. This is a healthy conversation, and we will do fact checking.
And I hope we do fact checking, and if I'm wrong, I will put out a YouTube apology. Set the
Yes,
record
ma'am.
straight.
Good evening, I'm Mama T. Lasseter. I am the grassroots community activist. Commissioner Welch, I just want you to verify some things because me and my homies, we have went over the plan. We have concerns that for years, when I was a kid, I could catch the bus anywhere to work. My daughter, she's unable to do that.
what will the plan do for economic development in this community and the routes in this community that the lady mentioned?
Thank you, Dr. Oliver, and thank you, Mama T, for your question. It will increase access to jobs. That is one of the biggest parts of this. We say we want folks to work. We say we want to give folks a hand up and not a handout. But if they can't get to the job, then we're never going to impact the community. We're never going to address poverty. And it's not just for poor people, it's for folks all around this county. We are adding, I think before you came in, I talked about it, we are adding 22nd this year, but not the whole route because we don't have the money to do it. But we're adding a part of 22nd. I think it's down to 9th Avenue. It's a small section. But, as Councilmember Cornell is already talking about, give us a service on 54th Avenue. 31st Street keeps coming up. If we don't have the revenue source to put that kind of service on the street, then we're going to move backwards. And that's what this is really about, access to jobs, access to health care. If you look at the demographics of who rides PSTA, 67% of those folks are going to work. They use it 5 days a week. I think 37% of the folks are over 55. Folks are depending on this, and either we fund it or we move backwards with the kind of cuts we talked about before.
Councilman?
Yeah, I don't think we're spending enough time or talking enough about education. It's really not going to do anybody any good to get them to their job if they don't have the skills to use when they get there. Right now, Florida ranks, and you're going to have to fact check me on this, I think Florida ranks 33 out of 50 states in the country in per pupil spending. In Florida, Pinellas County ranks 49 out of 67 in per pupil spending. So just increasing spending on per pupil does not necessarily equate to higher test skills and more jobs, but that's where I think we need to start to get these people the skills to the jobs that they can find.
But the skills, if they can't get to the job, do no good.
Let's move on to our next question. David, please.
Good evening. My name is Mary Brule, and I have a question regarding financing that I've not heard brought up in any of the forums. And that has to do with cost overruns, anticipated cost overruns, and ridership costs. Based on my knowledge and the information I've gotten from the internet, similar projects in other similar size locations such as Portland, Charlotte, and other areas as that have experienced significant cost overruns. In some cases, double and triple what the original dollars were anticipated. So my question is two parts on the financing part of it. One, there is a promise that our property tax, the transportation part of the property tax, will be eliminated. Is that permanent? Because I don't trust that it will be, because the governments have said before that things are never going to happen again, and they do. So that's my first question part, is on property tax. The second is, what is the anticipated ridership cost? We can talk all night long about train lines, bus lines, and if the cost to ride those buses and those trains keeps creeping up, it's going to get beyond the means of anybody in this room. So I'd like to hear you, hear your comments on the cost overruns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take these in order. And the first question you asked was about cost overruns. Yes, and in Salt Lake City, Utah, they've expanded, they've been on time, and their second expansion was with Mitt Romney for the Olympics. The third expansion finished last year on time and under budget. And I think we've got a track record in Pinellas County of bringing in big projects within the parameters of the penny for Pinellas, which is the same tax. Gives you the same amount as the sales tax each year. We just finished the big public safety facility on Ormerton where the sheriff is, emergency management, 9/11, that came in on time and under budget. We've got a track record of doing that in Pinellas County. And like I said, Salt Lake City is one example where a big project was expanded on time and under budget. On the PSTA property tax, it is going away. It is going away. This will be the last fiscal year in FY15 if this passes. 3 ways we're trying to do that. Number one, the PSTA board, which is 13 folks that you elect, have said we're going to zero out that ad valorem. Second, as a guarantee to that, the county commission, which receives the tax, has an interlocal agreement with PSTA that requires that the tax be zeroed out with penalties if it is not, including up to and including going back to referendum and killing the tax permanently. And third, which is the really the key is going back to the legislature and asking them to take away PSTA's taxing authority. Now, that had already been done a couple of years ago. Bipartisan support from our legislative delegation passed both houses in Tallahassee. That would have assured that we couldn't pass a tax, but some of the same folks that are opposing Greenlight asked the governor to veto that bill. And that's why you don't have that guarantee, but we're going after those three ways. I'm assured that if this is voted on and passed by the people of Pinellas, no matter who the governor is in the future, they're going to sign that bill and make sure there's no double taxation. So there's three ways we're working on it.
What
And
about the ridership?
And the rates, and the rate.
I don't want to give you a number off the top of my head. I think it was still around the $250 per ride range. So,
But that'll go up.
well, that's an assumption.
It's the reality.
It went up on the buses. You know, one of the things we did, we cut routes a few years ago. We raised the fare because, you know, the thing was, well, the folks who ride it need to pay some of this as well. So we did raise the fares, but I think it was around $250 is what we're anticipating.
Councilman?
Ken's right. They've put forth a good faith effort on the interlocal agreement to reduce the PSTA millage rate to 0. But it's only as good as the paper it's written on. I believe Commissioner Welch is sincere that he would never vote to reinstate that. But he, unfortunately, will not be on the commission forever. And until the state legislature rescinds that ability, there is the potential for the property tax portion to come back. Now, we talk about Salt Lake. Salt Lake actually turned down the light rail option through a vote in 1992. And then in 94 or 95, they were awarded the Olympics. Shortly after that, the federal government decided to kick in 80% of their rail project. So they only had to come up with, I don't know, maybe like 15, 20, 200, I think it was like under 50 million. So they built their first starter rail line without any raising of taxes. And the other thing they have going for it is that the Utah Transit Board of Trustees is not made up of career politicians. There's a lot of smart business people on the Utah Transit Authority, and they have been frugal. So those are some of the reasons you're seeing the success in Salt Lake. And the ridership costs, are you talking about what people are paying for the ridership costs or what subsidies are for the ridership costs?
What the people are paying.
Okay, I have nothing to add to what you said there.
Just a point of clarification to add. Yes, if the legislation doesn't go through, then PSTA could raise the ad valorem, and the interlocal says if they raise it a penny, we take away a penny from their sales tax, plus we can go back to the voters and kill the tax. There's no incentive. They will have no net new dollars to do that. So I've got a copy of the interlocal that has the milestones and the provisions in there. It is very strong.
There is one little catch. They're only going to withhold that money if it doesn't negatively affect the bond rating for the agency. And all you need is one financial guy to say, yeah, this is going to hurt your bond rating, and then they don't have to take that penny back.
Next question, please. Hello. I keep hearing a lot of questions about what the alternative plan is or what other people would propose to be the plan would be. I just would like to ask, I'm not good at this. I keep hearing that if this doesn't pass, there's going to be a 30% reduction. And my thought is, what we need is better management of PSTA. Because anybody who would say that we have to have a 30% reduction isn't looking at the alternative that we could have 30% better efficiencies within our group. I mean, PSTA is for the 2015 budget, they're looking at increasing salaries, they're looking at hiring new people, and their labor costs are going to go up to 61%. So that's totally in the opposite direction, but I think they could be. So your question, never mind. So your question, and you're doing just fine.
I'm
So
horrible.
The question is to Commissioner Welch. I'm assuming
Why
you're
do you
asking
look-
about efficiency.
Why does PSTA look in terms of we have to reduce instead of we have to do
Why
better?
is it a reduction as opposed to greater efficiency increase?
Well, that's a good question. What was your name?
Joe.
Joe, you look familiar. Did you say 61% labor increase?
That's what it shows in FY.
61%.
61% labor costs. That's what they're showing in FY.
Labor cost, not increase. Okay. All right. Now, why do we project a long-term deficit at PST? What we've been doing over the last few years, at the height of the recession, we cut routes, we raised the fare that folks paid, we spent reserves to keep the service that we could keep on the road, we spent some capital dollars that we normally spend to buy buses for operations, and so we've been doing those things to try to keep the service on the road. Looking at our projections, which we talked about in our meeting yesterday, we are still in a deficit over the long term, and so the responsible thing to do is cut back the service so that we're not in deficit long term, and that's really the simple answer to it. If you go to psta.net, pull up our agenda from yesterday's meeting, and you'll see the budget presentation and the projections on it. So that's why you have to do the cuts if you don't get a new revenue source. We could raise the millage, that'll give us a little bit more money, but it won't solve the long-term problem.
Next question, please, David.
Good evening. My name is Marcus Harrison. Question for you. Starting out, I'm hearing a lot of things about, okay, this is what our plan is going to be, and the alternative is nothing. My question is why wasn't there an alternative proposed to be on the ballot initiative? In other words, right now, it's either the rail and with the increased bus service, or nothing. In other words, why didn't we just have an alternative with the bus service only? And so that, because I think everybody agrees, from what I'm hearing, is that we need better bus transportation, we need more education, and more focus on ensuring, educating people how to use the public transportation. But I think there's a lot of disagreement on whether we need the rail component. So right now, there wasn't any option.
So the question, are there multiple options? Were there other options studied, and especially just the bus option?
Yeah, Marcus, that's a good question. And yeah, there were several options looked at. If you pull up the alternatives analysis, we looked at BRT only instead of rail. We looked at different types of rail. That's why it's called the alternatives analysis. We looked at a set of alternatives. And really, this is a discussion that goes back 30 years. It didn't just start with the PMI or the alternatives analysis, but the alternatives analysis looked at all those options, looked at the economic development impact, looked at the TOD impact, looked at how you would fund the bus system, and it kind of came down to, you can do a half cent for bus, or you can do a full cent and do the bus and the rail. It almost comes out to 52-48 between the two on an annual basis. And the folks who were on those various committees, and there were several of them, the PMI, ACPT, the Transportation Task Force, all those folks said, for our community moving forward, short term and long term, the 1 cent option for bus and rail is the best one. Now, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Again, the real question would be, and I recognize that, I recognize what the alternative analysis was, but again, that's almost you telling us that this is what we have to have, instead of saying, instead of on the ballot initiative, and let the citizens decide, okay, do we just go with the half a cent? Go with a half a cent just for the bus service only, or do we go ahead and go with 1 cent to do bus service and the rail component?
Well, because we had
you're not giving us an option.
Yeah, because we had a multi-year process that involved the community. There were folks who were opposed to rail, who were part of these committees, and it was a conversation, and it came down to, this is the best solution, and that's the one that we're presenting. Ultimately, the citizens are going to decide, and there was a real push in the courts, in elections, to elect folks that would kill the plan. There were 2 lawsuits filed to try to stop this going forward. The courts didn't agree with the folks who filed those lawsuits, and the people should decide. And if they say no to this, then they'll see the consequences of what happens with PSTA. But maybe they'll. No, I mean, funding is funding. Funding is funding, and we didn't write this community bus plan. It says what it says, and y'all, some folks have touted the no new revenue. So if you're going to tout that, this is a fair look at what happens if you don't have a new revenue source. And so maybe if it doesn't pass, it comes back as a half cent. I don't know how many folks who are opposed to Greenlight would support a half cent. There are folks who are opposed to Greenlight as part of the no tax organization who didn't even want us to raise the millage a couple of years ago to 7.305 to keep the service that we have. So if they're not going to support a millage increase, I don't think they're going to support a half cent. So let's let the people decide. That's the way we work in this country.
I think we're all in agreement that the people will decide in November. But Councilman, do you have a rejoinder to that before our next question?
Why didn't we have an option to vote on buses versus buses and light rail? I don't know. I mean, who knows why? I mean, like Ken said, they've been working on it for 3 years. And, I'd be supportive of a half cents if we were addressing education, if we were addressing the $1 billion in unfunded sewer repairs we have in this county, if we could build up some resiliency due to climate change. Panama is fixing to open their new canal in next year. How many jobs would a new port down in South Pinellas bring to this part of the county? If we could, go for a half cents and accomplish some of those things, and including the buses in it, I'd be for it. I'd help advocate for it.
That's a whole other conversation if you're going to talk about the port.
Yeah.
Let's go on to our next question before we get into climate change and port construction.
Hi, my name is John, I live in St. Petersburg. Mr. Welch, my question revolves around what can you possibly say to have me believe in your credibility in what you're saying? The problem that I'm hearing is that everybody's talking about buses, and the passionate lady who was sitting over here earlier, buses, buses, buses. Everybody's talking about buses, but the fact is that I've been to several of these presentations, and the BSDA, Greenlight folks are all saying buses, 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 but 90%, so maybe you can fact check me on this, but approximately 90% of all the new revenue, if Greenlight was passed, would be going to pay for a rail. 10% would effectively be going to the buses.
That's not an accurate number.
What is the percentage?
It's about a 52-48 split on $128 million annual revenue.
Including capital cost and maintenance and operation cost?
Here's the page. You can take a look at it.
This is apparently one of those we will have to send to David, our fact checker, on the percentage that goes to rail and percentage to buses. Clearly a difference of opinion among our
But
folks.
to continue along with the credibility is, when you follow up with a situation with Mr. Miller and the DHS money, and the folks that are supporting Greenlight, the big corporations like Duke Energy who contributed, they will profit from Greenlight.
Sir, do you have a question?
The question is, I want you to give me something that I can believe you. I don't believe anything you're saying. What can you tell me?
Well, sir, I appreciate you being here, and I'm not going to lose sleep tonight if I don't convince you, because I see your butt, and I'm not going to convince you. But I'm not, and I still respect your opinion, but in terms of credibility, the numbers are here. So your 90% number is not accurate. On the DHS issue, we'll disagree on that. On the DHS issue, I want to hit on that for a minute, because there are a couple of things that were said that were not accurate. That grant happened last year when Greenlight was still in the planning process, and it didn't happen now during the campaign. We did not return the money after we received the letter from DHS. We returned the money a couple of weeks ago after Brad Miller had a conference call with DHS. Now look, Brad Miller made a mistake. He gave the board. Let's have a response, and we'll have other questions. Made a mistake, clearly misread what the grant required, and gave the board that information that we were in compliance. When he was told that no, that's not the case, he sent the money back, informed the board, and he made a mistake. Now, the taxpayers were not harmed. We returned the whole $354,000, but keep in mind, we handle $19–20 million in grants every year and handle them well. This was one outlier. It was a mistake, and when a person makes a mistake, admit it and say they're going to learn from it and put in processes so that doesn't happen again, I'm willing to give them a second chance. But it doesn't mean that this is a corrupt organization. It means it's an organization.
I didn't accuse you of being corrupt. I was talking about credibility.
I didn't say you did, but
well, you just said corrupt. I said credibility.
Well,
and in the business world, a corporation CEO who made a blunder that huge would not get an endorsement, a vote of confidence from his board.
That is not a question. Thank you for your question. And Councilman, do you want to have a final?
I'm not even sure where we're at, but let me just say.
I think we're talking about transportation, but I'm not sure.
Let me just say, if my city manager came to me and lied to me about why we spent, over $250,000 the way we did, and then he had to backtrack, and there's potential criminal violations, I would do everything I could to make sure my city manager was out in the parking lot kicking rocks and not working for our city anymore.
Well, I want to just say one thing to that because you reminded me of something. You said we're under investigation for criminal violence.
I said possibly.
No, I wrote it down. You said, well, possibly. Well, I'm possibly 100 pounds. You can't put it out there and say they're possibly under investigation. Those are some pretty serious charges. We have not received anything to say we're under investigation. Those dollars were returned. A mistake was made, and again, we handle $19 to $20 million in grants every year.
Can we move on to the next question, please?
My name is Ryan. This question is for both of you gentlemen, and I'll preface it with some facts. The Federal Highway Administration posted a study that said the average cost of construction per mile, this is per lane of added highway, roads, or freeways, varies from $2.4 million to $15.4 million, not to mention the economic cost of heavy urban traffic and the constant upkeep that is needed. So how would you plan to address these 3 points? Number one, the cost of construction needs due to heavy use in urban areas, the congestion that is due to increase from the limited land and population increase, and the environmental impact of increased car use if the amount of buses that we have is to remain steady.
Councilman, why don't you start with this one?
That's a three-part question. The first one was the cost of infrastructure for building roads.
The cost of construction, including the economic cost of increased traffic around construction areas.
I don't quite follow the question. I'm not sure what you're trying to get at with the congestion around traffic.
Well, due to the heavy increase of cars that we've seen because of population increase, we're needing construction more often. How would your plan address construction needs due to the fact that we're having to build more often and that it is such a burden on us economically? Would your plan increase the amount of construction or decrease the amount of construction needed? Because it is $2.4 million to $15.4 million per mile per lane, and it is actually proven to not actually make a difference in congestion.
Yeah, well, that comes down to traffic management. Why aren't we using HOV lanes? Why aren't we making lanes capable of going both directions? When you leave Tampa in the afternoon, it's congested, right? But coming into Tampa, it may not. On the other side of the Howard Franklin, it's pretty open. So that's a matter of managing traffic, and we're not doing really anything to do that right now. So if we can manage the traffic, we can build fewer lanes, right? The point you had was on the environment and what congestion does on the environment, right?
Yeah, there have been multiple studies that show that Pinellas and Hillsborough County, all the places in the Tampa Bay area, are expected to double in population by 2050.
Okay.
So, how exactly would you say that using stuff like
I think the population in Pinellas is actually declining. In the last 10 years, recently we lost the Florida House representative because of declining population. As far as I'm still not quite following your question on the environment and how, you're talking about congestion and how it impacts the environment?
with your plan?
They told me not to do that. I'm not making a statement.
See how our rifle interchange works? It works fine.
So, how exactly does your plan address the environmental impacts of increased car use, not to mention just from maybe Pinellas, but the influx of cars where people are crossing the bay?
Okay, well, if you're managing traffic, you're going to have, hopefully, cars on the road for less amounts of time, right? And now we're making huge advancements in hybrids and electric vehicles. Being able to charge your car while it's moving is coming in the future. A zero emissions car is pretty good for the environment, right? So I think you're going to start to see more of those. I'd like to see road embedded charging for wireless capabilities for buses and cars.
A couple things. Just again, a fact. We are growing. If you go to census.gov, Pinellas County added population. In 2010, we were 916,542. In 2013, we're 929,048. We've added 12,500 people over the last 3 years. Look, like the rest of Florida, we lost population during the recession. but we are gaining that population back. If you take that 4,200 people a year who have come here over the last 3 years and project it out to 2035, you're going to be close to that $100,000 that's in the projection. So we are, the fact on census.gov, we are gaining population again. On what their plan does for congestion, I still have not heard a plan from the other side. I hear status quo.
It's not our job.
I have not heard a plan from the other side. Now, again, when you talk about the cost per lane, Almerton Road and US 19 are billion-dollar roads. They don't pay for themselves. We cannot continue just to add lanes, because the moment you add lanes, within a short time, they're full again. And you've seen what happened in Tampa. Try to go to Tampa anytime after 3 p.m. Look at McMullen Booth going north. We cannot simply add lanes, and the cost of major roadways is large as well, as US 19 and Almerton Road show.
Councilman, I sense perturbation in the force. There's this constant comment about the other plan. Can you speak to, is there an other plan? The commissioner talks about the no revenue option. I don't think that's a plan. Is there another plan that is on the table, or that you want to speak to, or how do we address those continuous questions about another plan?
I want to take advantage of technology, using your smartphone to find available parking spots, implementing wireless charging capabilities, expand our bus service, make our bus service something that's really comfortable to ride. I don't have $1 million like we've spent at PSTA to come up with all these plans. So the first thing we need to do is just find a way to utilize technology to decrease our dependence on so many cars, and that's changing right now. You say driverless cars is a fantasy. There are blind people someday that will be on the roads with us in driverless cars, and eventually it's coming. As soon as they can figure out how to make a driverless car interact with the traffic cop, then we're going to be really, really close to putting those into production. But by 2020, there will be some type of driverless functionality as an option on cars, just like cruise control was available as an option in the 70s.
And I agree, and it's a good thing with the number of folks that text while they drive, that we've got some intelligence in the cars to brake automatically, lane change, and if you read the literature, it's incremental, and folks say we will phase in improvements until we have fully automated cars. But that's not a plan. That is, someday we're going to have this. I have still not heard a plan, and one of the things you mentioned, Councilmember, was expand the bus service. How would you do that with a revenue source that's diminished, when you've already made cuts, when you've already increased fares? How would you expand the bus service?
Well, first of all, I've learned to be more frugal with how PSTA spends money. Secondly, we have, PSTA is going to have an extra $3 million a year, or $3 million next year, based on the rise in property values, and if you wanted to raise the millage rate to the cap. So those are two ways that I would try to implement to help expand bus service.
Well, that was a good tagline for your supporters, but
I'm going to let this go back and forth. I think this issue of efficiency and frugality is an important issue to dig down a little bit. I'd like to have the two gentlemen at some forbearance from the audience. Play this out.
Well, we've been frugal, and we've cut our service, we've cut routes. I've been at the meetings where folks have come and said, don't cut Route 30, don't cut this route, I depend on it, and we've had to still cut routes and reduce hours. We've raised fares, so just to say you could be more frugal, we've been frugal. I'd like to hear some specifics on exactly what you would cut and where you would add it back to the service, because we've been at this for several years now. Just like the city of Gulfport, just like the county, when you're based on property taxes and you're taking a 30–40% cut, you can't tell me that we haven't been frugal. And so the issue now is, what is the plan? When you just say electric grids and Google cars someday, that doesn't address the issue that we're facing at PST.
Councilman, any specific response on frugality in areas of perceived savings?
Yeah, there's a lot, but I'd like to move on to the next question.
All right. Next question, please.
I'm Roger Wilson from Seminole, and I'd like everybody just to step back and think about the big picture. I'd love to engage y'all and talk about the taxes and the alternative plans and the perceived congestion, but this is my 4th meeting, and in between I've tried to read everything I can about this program. proposed program, and I keep reading where it's going to increase the population. And you think about the stations, I've read and I've heard where each one of those stations is going to generate additional neighborhoods, additional commercial areas. That means more people. Question, what is the carrying capacity for Pinellas County?
That's a good question. And what I like about the plan is that, Representative, we have station area design, station area planning in each city that's along that route. They're working on station area plans with their community. They're going to determine what density they want. They're going to determine the zoning around those stations. And so that is a community-based project. We are growing anyway. We're growing by 12,500 people over the last 3 years without Greenlight. So we're going to grow one way or another. Folks love coming here. The other way that we're growing is with our visitors. We're at almost 6 million visitors a year. We are now a high tourism impact county, one of only, I think, 6 in the state of Florida. So not only are we growing from residents, but more and more visitors are coming here. And so I don't think we want to stop that. And so on the growth side, we're targeting the growth along that corridor where the infrastructure is, where each city will make their own determination about the kind of growth they want and the density. But that's a smarter way to grow. For me, it's along the corridor that can support it. And again, the tourists are coming. We don't want to stop the tourists.
And I'm not thinking about stopping it. I'm thinking about accommodating it. And we keep hearing about these developments and nothing about how you're going to address the increased population. But I will give you specific. Where are you going to get the water that these people are going to need, these new people, be they visitors or residents? And I'm going to give you something you have to be concerned about. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection did a study, and they estimate that by the year 2030, which is not that far away, most of the people in this room will still be alive then, we're going to need 28% more water than we're using today. 28% more water. That's a lot of water. Where are you going to get it? And who's going to pay for it?
Well,
So the question is really about accommodating population growth.
right.
Yeah. And if you're planning these type of programs, if you're supporting these kind of programs that ultimately are going to bring in more people, then you also have to plan for how you're going to accommodate those people. And I've not heard or read anything about that. And that has to be a concern.
I think we have that question. Let's ask both gentlemen to talk about accommodating growth in the county, regardless of these plans.
Well, to the water issue specifically.
Yes, my name is not really important. Dan, you referred to PSTA tracks increasing population boom. Won't the population boom increase homelessness, poverty, and poor? And have we made this mistake in the past? And why are we not increasing taxes to fund the homeless? Why are we trying to increase traffic problems right here in the city? At Williams Park, for example. What will we do with the poor in the future? I can't recite the scripture off the top of my head yet, but doesn't God say to take care of our poor? And how is increasing taxes obeying our Father's scriptures? This is just keeping the poor poor. We want to take this chance. If the government is not funded, how will this affect the people? Is this tax increase helping out people, or is it supporting the elite, destroying the middle class? There is no gray area. We should do what Savior Jesus would do and take the narrow path to the right.
So what's specifically your question, sir?
Why are we telling how this is helping the future when we're not even concerned about the presence? Instead of using our own understanding to go back to the scriptures.
And who was that? I'm not sure I heard a question, but who was that addressed to? Either you gentlemen want to respond?
I didn't understand the question. You made some good points, but I didn't understand your question.
Here's a question. Won't the population boom increase homelessness, poverty, and the poor?
As you know, the poor will always be with us. So we're going to have poor folks in our community regardless, but I'm not sure what your question is.
Sir, how does that relate, or does it relate? Does your question relate to the impact of this plan on that? I'm trying to determine how your question relates to transit.
Dr. Oliver, I think he just wants to know how we're going to make sure we take care of the poor while we're adding 200,000 more people to the county.
Is that your question?
Okay. wants to know, I'm gonna take care of the poll. Well, the first thing I would do is I wouldn't tax them. You're right, we need to look out for those folks. And I think there's also been some talk at the state legislature level of raising another sales tax to help, help the homeless challenges. So,
Well, Pinellas County, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Pinellas County has a very good track record of trying to help poor and low-income people. Our Housing Trust Fund was a part of that. Restoring social action funding and Meals on Wheels was a part of that. The Land Trust was a part of that. The dollars that we give, I believe it's around $12 million to the homeless and for emergency assistance so folks don't become homeless. Pinellas County has a good track record of doing that. And to say that this plan is driving 200,000 people here, as I said, we've had 12,500 come here in the last 3 years and the plan is not in place. So folks are going to continue coming to our county. It's, do we have the infrastructure to support them when they do come?
Next question, please. David?
Hello, everybody. My name is Daryl Hamill, and I just wanted to say that there was a lot of good points tonight, as far as, environment and things like that. What we do for alternatives. Let me just say that for the environment, I think we should use more solar energy here, right? We're in the Sunshine State. Also, if you're worried about the environment and you want like a eco-friendly car, let me know. We're in the car, I can help you out with that. But one thing I do know is if you guys do your job correctly, if we lost 200,000 people, they will come back. They should come back if you guys do your job correctly, the environment and everything. So, I think we should be prepared for that. But my big question is this. What's this really about? It's about money. Whenever it comes to government, it's about money. Death and taxes, the two things that are guaranteed. So I have a question for both of you. And Mr. Welch, you can correct me if I'm incorrect. Please do if I am. I believe for the capital expenditures, so in other words, this will be $130,000 approximately per year, or $130 million per year that this will increase up to, and that'll help fund the bus and the train. But there's the capital expenditure that by the time the money is spent, it'll be over $2 billion. Is that correct?
Fully costed with the UI study, we have a inflation rate in there. It is over $2 billion over the life of the project.
Okay.
But on an annual basis, just to give you the numbers, out of that $128 million,
Okay.
58.9 of it is for bus, and 66.2 is for the capital, including some bonding costs.
Okay. So we're over $2 billion. $2 billion. And my other question, so I get to my final question is some of that money going to be borrowed from the federal government? Is it going to come from
I wouldn't say borrow. The federal government will contribute to the project just as they would contribute to high-speed rail, just as they contribute to light rail projects around the nation. We toured Miami-Dade with Senator Congressman Michael, and we saw a couple of $1 billion under development just in a couple of hours with their multimodal system, with their tunnel. Those dollars are going around the country. There are our tax dollars. I think some of those should come back to fund projects.
I agree.
You asked if there was a loan, right?
Well, are we borrowing the money?
Yes, the plan includes $820 million in TIFI loans.
Okay. So let me get to my question now. The federal government has put in some great programs over the years, like Social Security and whatnot, and they've run into a big problem where they can't fund that. Our federal government is $17 trillion in debt, correct? So we're all borrowing, every single one of us in this country. Who is on the hook if they can't make good on their promise to pay us money? Now, I'm a renter, so you're already increasing my taxes. And to be honest, when I went to middle school, I rode a bus, and my mom and I couldn't afford a car. I could never see my grandmother in it. Once we got a car, it was like awesome. Now I can go out in the city and go visit. So my taxes are going to increase because I probably won't ride a train or bus. If we cannot get the money from the federal government, who has to pay for that? Where do we get it from? Or do we have to increase our taxes again?
There are provisions in the interlocal that have milestones, and one of those milestones is that we have submitted applications to FTA and that is successful. There are rollback provisions in that if that does not happen. But our staff that has researched this says every community that has passed a local funding has received funding from the federal government. Our congressional representatives, even those who do not support Greenlight, Congressman Jolly, have said if it passes, they will do everything they can to get matching dollars for our community. Congresswoman Casper's on board, Senator Nelson's on board. And again, it comes back to what Representative Michael was saying. You know, other parts of the nation are getting federal dollars for their projects. We're the last one who hasn't. And I guess if there's a question about full faith and credit of the country, you know, I've heard that argument before. That was the argument that we shouldn't take the stimulus money that the state balanced their budget on for a couple of years. I still have faith in this country. And as long as those dollars are funding projects around the nation, they ought to fund those projects in Pinellas County as well.
Councilman?
It's not if, it's when the federal funding doesn't come in as projected. In 2011, the U.S. credit rating was downgraded for the first time in the country's history. And there's really no tolerance in Congress right now for more light rail projects. I think the Federal Highway Trust Fund is running an annual $20 billion deficit with another $80 billion in deferred maintenance. So the federal tolerance for funding on high-cost local wish list projects is rapidly declining as the money is running out. So the only options would be to raise the taxes or cut programs. So if they want to fund the highway transportation or the highway trust fund, they're going to have to raise the federal gas tax. And they were talking about that right before the August recess. So we'll see what happens there.
You guys, just really quick, my question was, what happens if we don't?
Okay, well, what happens? Well, look what happened to Charlotte. They said it was going to cost $225 million to build a 12-mile rail. That ended up costing twice that, and they only got 9 miles. So what might happen in our case, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we might have a train that starts in St. Petersburg but doesn't reach all the way to Clearwater.
We will go through the procedure and assure that we have the federal funding. If not, we'll look at rolling back. But again, every other community that's passed a local tax has received federal funding. And we've been talking to FTA all throughout this process. And we're confident that our project will rate high enough to draw down the federal funding.
Yes, we have another question. I noticed that gentleman over there on the other side to it. We haven't gotten to that side as much. I want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity. We have about
7 more minutes, so we're going to get a couple more questions, and then I know we'll give our panelists a round of applause, and then I'm sure they'll stick around for a little. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Welch, I've supported the Penny for Pinellas over the years, and also the Juvenile Welfare Board millage funding, and I'm just a little confused about why we're using a regressive tax, a penny sales tax, as opposed to leveraging property taxes. And could you just help clarify in my mind why we're doing that?
I mean, that's a good question. We had several task forces. One was a transit funding task force to look at all the options. What did you do? I showed earlier, I think you were here, the gas tax. You max out the gas tax. Be like Sarasota and Manatee County. That would bring in about $3 million per penny. So $15 million we could raise through doing that. We are almost at our cap for PSTA. We're at 0.7305. We can only go to 0.75. So there's only a limited amount. I think it's in the hundreds of thousands that we could raise there. There are sections of the county, St. Pete Beach, which has some pretty big, nice hotels, Treasure Island, Kenneth City, Tierra Verde, that don't pay into the property tax. And so we are limited in revenue sources. Sales tax, after looking at everything, was the best source. And looking at the penny for Pinellas and its track record being approved 3 times for the voters, we thought that was the best source to use it. But we looked at other options, and the other option is really the no new revenue. Leave it as it is, build the best system you can, and folks that have their service cut or have longer wait times have to deal with it. Those are really the 2 tracks. You can't solve it just with gas tax. You can't solve it just with raising that millage up to 0.75.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the penny for Pinellas. In the same year that this transit tax would take effect, if this plan passes, voters will be asked to renew the penny for Pinellas. And the same people that aren't paying attention to this will think that we're going to 9 cents when the penny for Pinellas comes up for renewal. So just by default, it's in jeopardy on whether or not it will pass. I don't think we're going to spend $1 million promoting the penny for Pinellas like we are Greenlight Pinellas.
Well, we haven't spent $1 million promoting. You've said that several times. Florida Department of Transportation did an investigation at the behest of some folks in this room and said we were not advocating, we were educating. That came from the Inspector General.
We're going to have one more. We're going to have, it's whether it's 25% or 33% or 28.1%. We're going to get answers to all these questions. One more question, then I'm going to go off script, then I'm going to get David up, and then we're going to adjourn on time. Yes, sir.
I'm Tom from Clearwater. I just had a question regarding Mr. Welch. You said something about ridership is increasing in the last number of years. I've been reading it in our Clearwater local paper, Clearwater Beacon. Also, you mentioned over $1 million in additional revenue or in funding that's in savings. I would think that with all the increase in ridership and the increase in revenue that we're seeing at PSTA, that perhaps you could use some of that money to help fund Mama's 58th Street bus that she needs. I think these are areas that you guys need to be looking at as part of your ongoing project here and not asking us for additional revenues.
Well, and we are doing exactly that. And I said that when I answered her. We are adding 22nd Street and adding other service with some of those dollars that we've saved. So we're doing exactly that.
I don't think that was a question.
I'm going to go off script because I'd like to give both, first of all, let's give both these gentlemen a round of applause for an excellent job. Each. I haven't talked to either one of them about this, so this will be a surprise. A couple of minutes each for a closing statement, because some things were said at the beginning, and I think both of them, I know the councilman didn't finish his presentation, and we tried to be fair in terms of 15 minutes, and I know there was some things said, so and we'll start with the councilman. Each have a couple of minutes to kind of wrap up and make your best case, and then we will bring David up to close it out, and then we'll adjourn. Councilman?
I'm not ready. Do you want to go ahead?
No, you go first.
Okay.
I'm just curious how many people in this building, in this room actually take the bus. I do. We don't have a car.
Councilman?
Okay. Yeah, I didn't get to a lot of points in my slide. I want you to know that when you look across this county, there's a lot of infrastructure that we are already failing to maintain. Right now, the most iconic symbol in St. Petersburg, the pier, has been closed for over a year. And it's going to be closed for years to come. You know, why aren't we addressing what we have now and maintaining it to a level of quality where we can be enjoying it instead of closing it? The Tampa Bay Rays, they're a first-class team, right? But unfortunately, they're playing in the last place park. That's a franchise we can't afford to lose. And I'm afraid that, you know, they may have already gone. We don't know yet. So my main point is I want to take care of existing infrastructure before we start looking for new things to maintain, because we can't maintain what we have now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Thank you. It's been great to be here. Councilmember, I can't believe I forget your last name. Liedtke, yes. It was good to have this conversation with you. You know, I just think we need to be clear on the facts. You mentioned the pier. The pier's fully paid for. The county has contributed TIF funds. That is fully paid for. That's not an issue of having funding. That's the issue of coming up with a design that folks can agree on. The Rays, again, the county has contributed more than $100 million to the stadium, which I think is a fine stadium. Again, that's an issue of where the Rays want to play long term, but again, that'll be paid off next year in terms of the county. This is really a conversation about priorities and what we think is important in this county. And do we think that public transit is as important as public education, public safety, public health, and all the other things that government is supposed to provide in cooperation with the community? We think Greenlight Pinellas is that plan to move us forward, and I would urge everyone who's watching this to visit greenlightpinellas.com or visit voteyesongreenlight.com. Get the information on November 4th, or when you vote early or by mail ballot, cast your ballot.
It will be in the people's hands. David, close it out, and thank you all again for coming.
I'd like to ask you to acknowledge acknowledge Dr. Oliver's superb moderation too. Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Dan, for a great presentation. I just want to emphasize that the Institute is about civil discourse. We believe that we can debate these controversial issues without yelling at each other, and unfortunately a little bit of that happened tonight, but we try to keep it, to try to eliminate it, but I just want you to know that this is what we do on a regular basis. And speaking of that, I want to emphasize, let you know about our next programs. As the provost of our downtown campus, we're repeating this program on September 30th in Clearwater. So if you want to learn more, please come out for that. And on October 2nd, we'll be interviewing the candidates for local office, county commission, and state legislature. That's all. Thank you all for coming. Have a safe trip home.